Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm Ariel Liguori, and I will be talking to you today about end-to-end service automation, and specifically the tasks that we were giving in the past to adopt this into the service portfolio or one of the largest service providers in Argentina. So a little background about myself. I'm a network architect, software engineer, working in the telco for the past 10 years. Now I'm shifted to the enterprise, but I'm still supporting some open source projects like this enterprise software orchestrator. So when they came up to us asking about end-to-end service automation, we should divide the word, right? And say end-to-end and automation. One of those was really known by us. It was automation, and I'm pretty sure that you are all familiar with that term and what it implies. So I like to always mention that automation is good because it will reduce your timings, your cost, time to market. It will be easy for you to not commit the same errors again, human errors. But there is also hidden cost. But I don't see there as consequences. I like to see it as cost, because when you do the automation, you will not stick to only one solution. You maybe start with some specific automation for one task, but then it starts growing. You see, automation is eager, so you will try to adapt to another systems. And when you do that, you will come up with integration. And integration has a cost. As always, right? Another thing that is really important for automation, there is no magic potion. I like to say there is no cookbook for automation. You will see a lot of books called cookbook for automation, right? But when it comes to your organization, you have different systems, and none of those systems is written in any book. So you will have to do pretty much all of the job by yourself or relying on some partner or vendor. And then we come up with another new word, end-to-end. We were familiar about that. But the question is, what are the people who is asking us about the end-to-end? What are they expecting, right? What is end-to-end in the terms of the C-level of, let's say, the stakeholders of this project? So what they really want to achieve. And I like to think that from our case, it was very simple, because we have a service portfolio that we want to automate and bring this end-to-end capability. And it was pretty much based on capabilities on the connectivity side to our products. Let's say L2 VPN, L3 VPN to the data center. And one simple example of end-to-end could be taken from the very first side when the end user is, and remember, I was working in the B2B segment, so it will be maybe the branch office of one of our customers, provide the service to the far side in our resource. In example, an L3 VPN from a branch office to the data center could be for the branch side to the resource on the DC side, VM, container, storage, whatever you want, whatever you provision. But when we came up with that, we say, okay, it's easy. It's just the path along that and automate that stuff. But then we realized that they were expecting something more. When you come to this end-to-end part, let's say, they are not just expecting the automation to take place. They also want to be visible and usable for the end user. And what does that mean? Yes, of course, a fancy UI. But from the terms of the end user, is they can interact with this automation. So wrapping up all those concepts, end-to-end automation, I like to come up with this diagram. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, but if not, you will be in the following upcoming session on these talks. This is a high-level architecture, high-level overview, of the ONAP architecture. You can see different building blocks. And I like to put the end-to-end word towards the diagrams to explain that when you try to do actually the end-to-end, there is a lot of services, a lot of products inside that should work together. And this is not really a simple thing. you have to take care about a lot of considerations. And something that I always mention is attached to standards. That's not because we are on an event with a huge presence of Etsy. It's because if you do that, your life will be easier. Just figure it out that, just an example, you want to create one of those tiny boxes, let's say the BFC. But also, some of them just bought a new service orchestrator for you. And you say, okay, I have my own BFC, I want to integrate with that. But say what? You don't attach the standards. So when you try to do this orchestration, of course, it can be done. The integration will have a cost, and that cost would be you developing the integration to your new SO, or you paying money to the vendor to do that integration. If you attach the standards, I'm not saying that the world is going to be easier, because the integration should have to take place and you have to test it, but at least the first part, which is, let's say, the common language between the two boxes, should be the same. So with that basic introduction, I'm more a rational guy. So when they came up with this information and this project to me, I like to say that before flying, I like to do the proper math, right? Before starting with the service automation, end-to-end, I like to analyze what is on the market, on the community, and also see what we can do with the tools that we have in place. And remember, this project started 1.5 years ago. So we just take a few looks on the current controllers and current orchestrators that were in the market by that time, and also some open source community projects. And we came up with different findings, but all towards the same, that when you choose, this was very, very disaggregated, meaning that you have a lot of choices like a la carte selection for orchestrator or controllers. And each of those has specific domains. For example, you can have optical domains, IP domain, data center domain, controller focused per domain. I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but of course it will have a further cost when you have to integrate multiple domains, because I'm thinking out loud just right now, but when we try to create this service, we have at least 2 domains, the IP backbone domain and the data center domain. So if those are 2 different controllers, we should do the integration with a vendor or with our own code. We also see most of projects based on open source, some of them attached to standards, some not, some partially. And of course, it was also some, let's say, controller and orchestrator tied to the BNF, saying that when you bought one BNF box, it comes with the controller, but you cannot separate them, right? They are tied, they are bound together. I don't like that kind of stuff. But also the analysis, it was just for the vendor space or the community. It should also have take place in the organization itself. Because when you try to do this end-to-end automation, it's not just a problem to the out-of-the-box solution that you will build or you will create. You will have to do a lot of things into your organization. Let's say BSS, OSS systems, processes, and supporting systems itself. So this is a huge analysis that can be simplified in only one simple question. If you can answer, can you gather all the information that you need to provision a service in an automated way? That will be enough. And I also like to say, it's not needed to do it automatically. It's easier also if you have all the information in one system. But for most of the companies that I have been working with, and I have bringing consultancy, they don't have that. And why is that? Because if you ask this question to different guys, they will come up with a different response, right? If you ask to the BSS guy, he will say, yes, I have all the client information and also the service. If you ask the network guy, he will say, yes, I have all the IP addressings and the encapsulation that you need. But you need to ask this to the very guy, the one that do the provisioning of the service itself. That one is the one who looks at the BSS and gets the information from the client. It knows the topology and which nodes do he needs to configure, also knows the encapsulation in the DC side, the IP address blocks to use, and the service specifications like bandwidth, type of service, QoS, whatever you want. So that guy is the one that knows pretty much all the information that you need, and all the information, and that is really important, that you really need to model in your data model for your following systems, right? Even if you bought one box, one controller, one orchestrator, they could have inventory systems, but if you already have in place, you will have to integrate them. Again, standards. If they do not have, and you don't have, someone has to provide that. Guess what? Bought a new box. And the last part of the analysis was pretty much the coverage. And I like to talk about the coverage like we are seeing a lot of movement around net DevOps and DevOps, all the companies moving toward that model. And I've been talking this morning with few guys saying that they cannot move towards this movement because they have a lot of legacy silos that they cannot attack, right? And instead of thinking about silos or support for net DevOps or netconf or OpenFlow, as someone has asked me, I like to think about different domains. And in the path that you are running, if you want to orchestrate a service in different domains, you need to understand which product are you tackling first, right? And based on that, you will see which domains are really necessary to care about. Because maybe you say, my optical network is not capable to provide an SBI, so I cannot talk with that. But do you need it for your first service? You have to do that investment, upgrading that. So that's something that is really, really important. So based on the analysis, we came up with some decision matrix comparison table where we weight all the responses. And we use mostly different aspects to evaluate which one was the best: the architecture, the coverage in the domains, the knowledge, and of course, time and cost that will imply. So the most important one for me was architecture and knowledge. In architecture, what we evaluate was if it was vendor locked in, or if we can integrate with different vendors, pretty much based on standards. So we don't try to test under a POC different working environments. We just read their replies saying that they are aware of standards, if they are using standard, and how complete are they standard-based. And the knowledge was if we want to do it ourselves, or if we want to stick with one vendor, one partner, or different vendors doing it. So our approach, I like to think that was the one that we came up with. If you ask a group of network and software engineers to do a system, they will come up with the same response that we came. And it's saying creating and do it yourself, right? But don't reinvent the wheel. So if you can take, for instance, controller like ONOS into your code, let's use it, let's integrate with them, but not bring the business logic into some vendor product. So we came up with some requirements that we planned that like the most important ones that we want to fulfill, like a service-oriented architecture that should be self-service. It should cover end-to-end in the multiple domains that we have our services, which was by that time IP and DC. And the motivations, I numbered a lot of them, but the most important was grabbing the knowledge and apply the infrastructure and development best practices that we didn't see in the analysis that we made in the state of the art. Meaning that maybe some of the orchestrators or controllers that were running out there was monolithic, not cloud ready. So we want to do it in the right way. So what is Open Network Service Automation? It's a modular and open source service orchestrator that supports multiple domains, currently IP and DC, and it's aligned with the industry standards APIs. Quickly reminder about the architecture decisions that we made was for design, most important, separation of concerns. So each module, it's independent, has its own responsibility. It's a distributed system, and again, open APIs attached to standards. Some development patterns that we use Memento for definite state machines, we use Facade to integrate with different systems, and we use convention over configuration. This is one of the most important. It is a pattern itself if you use supporting documentation. And once you agree into a convention, will make your life easier if you're developing, right? And from the infrastructure side, again, what I mentioned, cloud-ready, scalable, highly available, container-based, and self-healing that you see a question mark there. Self-healing, it was only an infra level. How we face the integration was basically REST APIs, externally, internally, most of them well aligned to standards. Specifically, the MBI was based on the on-app service orchestrator was. Like in Frankfurt, it's aligned with Etsy. And for the SBI, multiple domain based on the controller support, or even with some constructed by ourselves, netconf or SSH domains. So, of roadmap, what we already delivered, VPN and internet services, zero-touch provisioning in our network for the IP backbone and the data center, self-service bandwidth modification over that service, and BCP provisioning into 2 different VIMs, which were OpenStack and VMware vSphere. It say also Q4 2019. I will say also Q1 2020. It's the ONOS integration, some vendor NFBOs third-party integration. I cannot name which one of those NFBOs for self-healing at the service level, and cellular network integration for backup for the B2B services. Well, I always say we because I like to thank all my other colleagues that work with me in the coding and developing. And that's all, guys.